The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Peter came up and said to Jesus, "Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began the reckoning, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And as he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, 'Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the Lord of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But that same servant, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat, he said, 'Pay what you owe.' So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' He refused and went and put him in prison till he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their Lord all that had taken place. Then his Lord summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant? And I had mercy on you.' And in anger his Lord delivered him to the jailers till he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart." The Gospel of the Lord. The Lord is good, and all the time. We gather here in this sacrifice of Mass to thank God for protecting us during our holidays, and also for enabling us to come back. Let us give him a mighty hand clap. God is indeed gracious. Today's readings give us a theme on forgiveness. When it comes to doing something easy, like watching TV, watching a movie, you've been in holidays and you've been doing this a lot. Been watching TV, watching movies, soaps. When it comes to that, we just tend to go lazy and lose track of time. Sometimes we do not even question how much time we are using to do some of those activities. And when it comes to doing something that we like, For example, eating. The limit is the size of our tummy sometimes. We may want to go on eating, but because of the limited size of our tummies, then we end. But when it comes to doing something very difficult, then we are certainly going to try to avoid it and resist it. And all the time, we will be looking at the watch. When is this activity ending? For example, if Mass is difficult for you, you will keep on looking at your watch and sometimes dozing, wondering and asking yourself, when is this priest ending? When it comes to class, you'll always be anxious, waiting for a teacher to go out, for the lesson to end. Now that you've been home, sleeping up to whichever time you want, it might be difficult for you to wake up very early in the morning. And some of you, you'll have to be dragged from the dormitories. That is when we are doing something difficult. We will find all ways to try and resist. Even though that difficulty may be benefiting us, still we'll find some excuse of not doing it. But I want you to know that when there is something difficult, when there is difficulty in doing something, there is also much to learn from it. And not only to learn from it, but also to gain from it. It is just like the principle of life, where there is no gain, there is no what? Where there is no gain, there will be, where there is gain, there will be pain. Or where there is no pain, there is no gain. That is a principle of life. So when things are a little difficult, just know that there is something to learn from there, and there is some gain from that. So as you come back to begin your new term, and as we move towards the end of the year, because this is third term, just know that all the difficulties that you will experience, take them on, because they are providing something special for you to learn and to gain. But more than just the pain and the pain equation, sometimes our human ability is manifested in such situations. We are able to cope up. Sometimes we tend to think that our heads are too weak to grasp certain concepts. But like those who do economics, they will tell us of elasticity. Our brains are elastic. The more you stretch it, the more it will go, and you'll have to learn quite a number of things. So our brains are elastic. We should not limit them. We should push them to learn and learn new things. So this term, you should push yourself to learn a number of things. And we know that we are capable of doing that, as well as learning so many new things. In the gospel, Peter asked Jesus if forgiving someone 7 times is enough. Some of us, we don't even forgive more than 2 times. We forgive one, the second time we say, no. I forgave you the other time, now it is time for me to act. Peter asked Jesus if 7 times is enough. And Jesus surprisingly told Peter that 7 times is not enough. Multiply it by 77. So that is the number you are supposed to forgive. So while some of you get tired at the second time of forgiving, Jesus is telling us to forgive 7 times 77. That is quite a lot. And I know some of you might take advantage of that. When arrested doing a certain crime by a teacher, you may say, Jesus said 77. Don't be manipulators. Peter asked that question about forgiveness because forgiveness is indeed so difficult. As I've said, that some of us get tired at either the first or the second time. So Peter asked that, well knowing that forgiving is something difficult. It is also our experience that when someone wrongs us grievously, it is difficult to forgive. We will resist forgiving. We will detest that person. Sometimes we will cut all that we had with that person, including conversation. Even if that person were to ask for forgiveness, we may not be that willing to forgive. And that is how difficult forgiving is. And the reason sometimes we give, that what if that person wrongs us again? Then our forgiveness is taken lightly and taken for granted. Not so. So sometimes we say we must teach them a hard lesson. A lesson they should not forget in life. And besides that, we have this resentment, this resentful side in us that wants to keep that person every time in sort of a guilty ransom. Sometimes we want that person to remain guilty by not forgiving. But Jesus today is telling us that forgiveness should not be under discussion. Forgiveness is a must. We must forgive. And here is where the first reading has something to teach us. The first reading says, resentment and anger, these are foul things. And whoever exerts vengeance will experience vengeance. So as we pay back in the same currency to our friends, the first reading is telling us that we will also be paid back in the same currency. Sometimes our colleagues do what are totally human mistakes, and we tend to refuse to accept that these are totally human mistakes. We are called upon today to learn to forgive. Sometimes our hearts are heavy. You've been in the holidays. Perhaps some things did not go on well at home, either with your brothers or with your parents. Sometimes some of our parents neglect us, and we find us so hard to forgive them. Sometimes we feel there are people who are there to hurt us, and they are always following us to do wrong to us. Jesus is telling us that we should not pay back in the same currency, and that is what the first reading is telling us. That vengeance is not ours, vengeance is for the Lord. So if we carry out vengeance, in the same vein we will receive the same. We accept that we are mere creatures, creatures of flesh, and we cherish resentment and anger. Sometimes we even, we even plan how we should not forgive. We even seek advice from our colleagues. And our colleagues will tell us, if you forgive that person, then you are a fool. You see? And then we also think that that is the best advice. And we go on to execute the same plans. We must forgive. As much as the first reading pointed out the difficulty of humanity with forgiveness, it also brings us for deeper reflection and revelation. That reflection and revelation is emphasized by the word remember. We must remember the last things. We must remember that we are to die. We must remember death. We must remember disintegration. We must remember that we are also weak. We are not perfect in whatever we do. We must remember that we will turn to dust. We must remember the commandments of God. We must remember the covenant of the Most High. We must remember that every day we also sin against the others. Therefore, giving forgiveness to others is a way of opening up of our accounts of receiving forgiveness from others. As we remember all this, we may say that we will try to forgive, but we won't forget. You know, there are people have very funny statements. I will forgive, but I will not forget. As we say that we can forgive and we will not forget. Yes, we may not forget. We may not forget the wrong, and we may not forget the hurt and the pain. That is in our human nature. But as much as Jesus is asking us to forgive, He's also not asking us to forget the pain and the hurt. Did Jesus forget his pain? The pain that he went through? Jesus did not forget the pain that he went through. The hurt of his suffering at the cross. In fact, he decided to retain the 5 wounds on his body as a sign of remembrance of what he went through. So Jesus is not asking us to forget. Those 5 wounds of Jesus will make us remember. Remember that prayer of Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Those 5 wounds are there to remind us that prayer. So every time people wrong us, every time people sin against us, we must pray that prayer. And in taking that prayer, we will learn to forgive. Taking the example of our Master. God our Father will not forget that prayer of Jesus. And God will always remember what we have done. Some of you, I do not know whether some of you committed crimes here last term. But if you did, ask for forgiveness. Because forgiveness is given to a repentant sinner. And this time, if you happen to commit crimes here, please learn to ask for forgiveness with a sincere heart. If you left your homes to come here, having annoyed some people, you know, some of you annoy your parents right from the day you go home till the time you are brought back here. Parents are always quarreling with you. Even when it comes to the time of going back to school and you are told, please make your simple budget. You make a budget that equals to a canteen of a school. And that also annoys the parents. Some of you annoy people here, annoy teachers because of your laziness. You don't want to read. You don't want to do what you have to do as a student here. And by extension, you annoy your parents too. Because when you perform badly, you annoy the teacher, you annoy the parents. That will come back to haunt you. So as we are here, let us do that we consider difficult. Let us wake up early, let us read hard, let us learn to behave and be like good students. In doing so, we will learn and we will gain. The Lord be with you.